Alright, so the next problem I'm going to do is number 10, polynomials and factoring. So this problem is kind of interesting. It says the area of a square is 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. What is the length of one side? What is the perimeter? Your answers to these two questions will be polynomials. So basically you have a square and they tell you that the area is 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. So here's the deal, guys. You guys remember a square, to find the area of a square or even like a rectangle, area is length times your width. So this is your length and this is your width. That's how you found the total area of the square. But now that's for any like rectangular shape. But something unique about a square is the sides are the same. So your length and your width is going to be the same. So I can rewrite my area equation as side squared. So this length times this length is going to give me this length. I know that the area is 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. So basically I have to break these up into two factors. Two factors which have to be the same, right? Because it's a square. Yes, yes. So I have to break this up into two factors that are the same. Remember, I want to be logical about this. Before I even start the problem, I need to know when I factor this out, they need to be the same in order for it to multiply out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor this out. Now, first things first is always look for your GCF. Do they have anything in common? There's no number in common and there's no x in common. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to split the middle. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to multiply my a times c. So 9 times 4 is 36. So now I'm going to ask myself, what are my factors of 36 that add up to 12? So first thing that comes to mind is 6 and 6. 6 times 6 is 36. When I add them, you get 12. So now I can rewrite 12. I'm going to split the middle term. I can rewrite 12 as 4x squared plus my factors plus 6x plus 6x plus 9. See how I split the middle? That's why it's called split the middle. So my next step is now I'm going to do group. So I'm going to group these first two terms and then these last two terms together. And I want to check what do they have in common, factor out the GCF. So looking at this first little factor bubble, I have a 2 in common, and then I have an x in common. So 2 times what gives me 4? What am I missing? A 2. And then x times what gives me x squared? X. Alright, for my next term, x is already there, so 2 times what gives me 6? 3. So this guy's done. I already factored him out. Now let's do this guy. What do they have in common? What can I pull out? What's your GCF? A 3. Now this guy doesn't have an x, so I cannot factor an x because he doesn't have an x. So 3 is my only greatest common factor. So 3 times what gives me 6x? I'm missing a 2 and an x. And 3 times what gives me 9? I'm missing a 3. Biggest clue here, you should always get the same thing. It's a little fun, easy way to make sure you're doing it right. So you get 2x plus 3. That's your common term. What is left over? You have the 2x and another plus 3. So that's my second factor. So see, now we have the same thing. 2x plus 3 times 2x plus 3. So this is one of your sides. That's the answer. So your side length is 2x plus 3. And the last thing they asked was, what is a perimeter? So if this is 2x plus 3, each side is 2x plus 3, that means all the way around it's going to be 2x plus 3. So if they want me to find what is the perimeter, well, the formula to find the perimeter is just add up all the sides. So I'm first going to simplify by finding the common terms. So I'm going to add all the x's together. So 2x plus 2x plus 2x plus 2x is 2, 4, 6, 8. So I have 8x. And then now I'm going to add all the numbers together. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. 3, 6, 9, 12. So 8x plus 12 is my perimeter. Alright, so next one I'm going to do is number 12. So number 12, get it on the screen, sorry. Number 12 on your review, and it's very similar to number 11, so I'm going to do number 12. It says, find the GCF of this guy right here. So we have 3 terms. Y'all see it? 1, 2, 3 separate terms that we need to factor out the GCF. Now, just kind of a rule of thumb on a little side note. A lot of my kids get confused. When do I factor out a negative? I'm not really sure. So when to factor out negative. So this is what I always tell my kids. So if you have, I'm just going to do an example of 2 terms. If you have a negative number, so do y'all know hashtag also means number? If you have a negative number minus a negative number, so like negative 2x minus 3x, just making up an example. Do you see how they both have a negative? You would factor out the negative. So it'd be like negative 2x plus 3x if you did that. Now another example, if you had a negative in front, so you had a negative number plus a negative, or plus a positive number. So another example would be like negative x squared plus x. You always, if you have the negative in front, you want to factor it out because that's the highest degree. So factor out negative. So this would be a negative x. They have an x in common. So it would be x, a negative times a negative is a positive. So you have this negative. Yeah, negative times negative is positive, so you'd get 1. So you factor out the negative. So the last one is if you have a positive number minus a negative number. So if I had something like x cubed minus x squared, just made that up. So you had a positive number minus minus a number. Here you do not factor. Do not factor negative. So here you would just factor out an x squared. So you did x minus 1, just like that. So it's only when they're both negative or you have a negative in front. But if you just have a positive number and a negative number, you do not factor the negative in front. So with that being said, let's look at number 12. It says find the GCF. So you have negative 4y to the 4th, z to the 3rd power, minus 12x to the 4th, y to the 5th, z to the 3rd power, minus 9yz squared. So for number 12, do you see how these 3 terms all have negatives in it? So I'm going to factor out a negative as part of my GCF. Now what is my greatest common factor for the numbers? Does 4 go into 12? Yes. But does 4 go into 9? No. So they have no greatest common factor for the numbers. So I'm going to move on to the x. Do they all have an x in common? This guy doesn't, this guy does, this guy doesn't. So I can't factor an x out. Do they all have y's in common? So this guy has y to the 4th, this guy has y to the 5th, and this guy has y. So I'm going to factor out a y because they just have a y in common. Alright, now look at the z. Do you see here I have z to the 3rd, z to the 3rd, z squared. What do they have in common? The z squared. So now I'm going to write my big Chumonga factor bubble. So I'm going to ask myself, okay, 3 terms now. Negative times the negative, we're good. What am I missing to get from here to here? So I'm missing a 4. I'm missing y times what gives you y to the 4, y to the 3rd power. Z squared times what gives you z to the 3rd power. I'm missing a z. Alright, so a negative times what gives me a negative? I'm missing a, it's positive. I'm missing a 12, right? And then y, let's see, I don't have an x to the 4th, so that stays. A y times what gives you y to the 5th, so that would be y to the 4th. And I'm missing z squared, z to the 3rd, I'm missing a z. And then the last one, the negative's already there, so I get a positive. Missing the 9. My y's already there. My y's already there, so I'm good. And then z squared is already there, so I'm good. Y z squared. So this is how you factor the GCF out, but they just want you to find the GCF. So this part right here in the box is your GCF. And that's number 12.